Lakeland Currents is sponsored by Nisswa Tax Service. Nisswa Tax Service offers tax preparation for individuals and businesses. Across from City Hall in Nisswa and on the web at nisswatax.com.
Hello again, everyone, and welcome to Lakeland Currents, where the program today is going to be talking about Minnesota's regional airports, and specifically the regional airport that's located in Brainerd. My guest today is Jeff Wig, who is the airport manager, and I think it's going to be a fascinating show because I think most of you are going to find out there's a lot of things going on at that airport that none of us really knew about. Jeff, thanks for being on the show. It's nice to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
You and I have worked together a little bit over the past, so we do know each other a little bit. And I know this is you've been on the job about a year?
About a year.
About a year now since you've been the airport manager. Mm-hmm. And, well, tell us a little bit about regional airports, because I know there's a lot of people in our area that still would drive to Minneapolis from Pequot Lakes or Brainerd or wherever, and it really isn't that much more expensive now to get on a plane and to cover that distance, is it?
No.
So tell us a little bit about the regional airports, and then we'll come back and talk a little bit about the Brainerd Airport. But how many are there, and what defines a regional airport over just another airport?
Sure. Well, there are many airports in the state of Minnesota, but an airport like Brainerd or some of the other regional airports like International Falls, Hibbing, Thief River Falls, a lot of those airports, what differentiates us is having scheduled airline service. So for us, we're serviced by Delta, and through a subsidiary or through a client of theirs, SkyWest Airlines. And so having that scheduled air service is a real important differentiator. And it really is a big economic development tool for the area when businesses are moving into town, thinking of opening a new operation. Frequently one of the questions they ask is, do they have that scheduled air service? Those regional airports, too, are looked at when we look at FAA and MnDOT funding. They're looked at a little bit differently as well because of that extra importance that they serve.
And how many flights do you have daily that come in here?
There are 3 Delta flights that come in and out every day. There's a flight out in the morning, the business traveler's flight that leaves at about 7 or 7:30 in the morning. And then there is a flight that comes in at 3 o'clock and comes up from the Twin Cities and drops people off and then turns around and goes back to the Twin Cities. And then we have the final flight in that comes in at about 8 o'clock in the evening.
So those are all metro flights back and forth from the metro area?
Yep.
Do you also get flights in from the north, from International Falls or Duluth, to the east?
Our morning flight actually originates up in International Falls. The plane overnights up there at International Falls, and then it turns around and comes back down here in the morning.
And you have recently remodeled the facility. It's beautiful. What was about 3 years ago?
The open house was in February of 2012.
Okay, so it wasn't that long ago.
It wasn't that long ago, and it was a $7 million renovation in addition to the building. So it was a pretty substantial upgrade to the facility. The rest of the facility was built in 1982, and so it was quite old, although I remember being there for the dedication. So the facility was in need of a lot of upgrades. Certainly things like security, things like that have changed quite a bit since 1982.
How many acres does the airport take up?
I believe it's about 1,300 acres. So we're a pretty good-sized landowner out there. And certainly one of the good things about the Brainerd Airport in particular is the critical approach zones to the airport, we own them. Some other airports may not, and then they run into zoning considerations then for the people who own that land.
So if they're coming in over houses, they have to work out arrangements with homeowners, I would guess, for silencing their houses, and I know they've done that in some of the larger metro area places.
Exactly. That, and there's just restrictions that FAA has on buildings within certain distances of the approach.
And how many employees do you have out there?
The total number of people who work at Brainerd is a little over 50. There are only actually 6 of us that work for the airport itself, the governmental authority that runs the airport, and all the rest of the people work for the airport tenants on the field. And we have a number of those.
And we'll get into this in a little bit, but there are a number of other businesses located at the airport that certainly I didn't know about. I knew of a few of them, but not as many or as far-reaching businesses as they have out there. It's pretty amazing. Security, do you have the same kind of TSA security at the airport here that they do in the other regional airports?
I'd say yes, we do, and we're serviced by the Transportation Security Administration, and we have full-time staff just like any of the other regional airports, and the same people who might be working down at Minneapolis.
Oh, really? So they rotate folks around?
Sometimes they do. Ours don't in particular, but some locations like St. Cloud, they do, where they're a little closer to the metro.
So if you have 3 or 4 flights a day and they come in, obviously they're there for the loading and unloading. What do those folks do in the rest of the day? Do they have different responsibilities that the TSA folks?
As soon as the people start checking in for the flight, the luggage, of course, they go through do the security precautions on the luggage, which takes a good amount of time before the flight. And then they need to be available before and during the flight boarding, and a little bit afterwards as well. So they're there quite a bit, and they do have some other security roles at the airport, but the rest of the time they'll be doing some training and some other things as well.
So when people come and fly out of your airport, how much should they be there in advance of a flight?
We typically tell people an hour.
An hour before?
An hour. What will usually happen is that people are usually not able to check in for 30 minutes prior to the flight. And that's just because all of the security things that need to happen, they need sufficient amount of time to do that. But I know in some of the larger metro airports, people will check in 90 minutes or 2 hours in advance, just in case there's security lines. And in airports the size of Brainerd, we usually don't have much for lines. So, in fact, almost never is there a real long line. So an hour before is plenty and gives people time to go have coffee or snack over at the cafe.
So what does it cost to fly round trip from Brainerd to Minneapolis and back? Roughly, this is Delta. That's
if you were just doing a Brainerd, Minneapolis, and then back to Brainerd, the cost for that would be somewhere around $130 about right now. But what we monitor more closely, and we monitor this all the time, about every 3 or 4 weeks, we run a list of 25 different destinations, and we say, okay, and we pick a random range of dates 5 weeks into the future. And we say, okay, what's it cost to fly from Minneapolis to that destination? What's the cheapest fare on Delta that day to go from, let's say, Brainerd or Minneapolis to Orlando? And then we say, okay, what's the cheapest fare that same set of dates, round trip, to go from Brainerd to Orlando? And then we measure the difference. And we see what's the premium that somebody has to pay to fly out of an airport like Brainerd. And we track that. And the average has been running, when I started, the average was running about $105. And the last 2 times we've run the figures, it's come in and the average has been about $65.
$65?
$65 additional round trip.
Wow. You can't drive your vehicle down and back for that.
No.
Really? I mean, most SUVs are larger vehicles. I'm sure a Prius or something maybe you could, but that's pretty reasonable. And what is the flight time?
Oh, about 24 minutes.
24 minutes. So you can shave off at least 2 hours, I would say, roughly in that range.
You can sometimes shave an hour off, just the time you save standing in security.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
So when you have passengers here, how wide of an area do you draw them from? Do you know?
Yeah, that's interesting that they call it a catchment area in the aviation business or the airline business. And it really seems to vary. We get people who will come from, I usually say 7 counties, Cass County, Crow Wing, Aiken, Todd, Wadena, Morrison, and Mille Lacs. Those are our primary counties. But we'll sometimes see people travel further than that. For instance, we have charters that go, Boeing 737 charters that Sun Country does from here to Laughlin, Nevada. And we run those about every 5 weeks. And we'll see people travel a pretty good distance for those from outside that 7
So do you have a regular clientele of business people that are using the plane on a regular basis, in addition to people that are just going on vacations or whatever?
Yeah, I think because of the nature of the Brainerd area, a lot of people where their work doesn't tie them to a specific location and they can live where they want to live, they'll live in a place like Brainerd. We have a lot of people who do that. And so they really rely on that airline service to be able to make that work. And so on particularly the Monday morning flight, it's actually kind of funny because we have so many of these people who qualify as gold or platinum Sky Priority customers for Delta. And so, when you go on an airline flight, they'll say, well, we'll board our Sky Priority customers first. And 3/4 of the waiting area stands up because everybody's Sky Priority. They're all frequent flyers on those Monday and Tuesday morning flights.
And how many passengers on the average plane that's flying back and forth now?
50 people.
50 people?
50. It's a regional jet, Canadair regional jet that holds 50.
Okay. Now, when the DNR does firefights and stuff in the area, are they usually housing those planes here if it's in a 100-mile radius of the Brainerd area?
Yeah.
Because it seems like you see a lot of those specialty planes that are made for dipping out of the lakes and stuff, and that's where they park, isn't it, a lot of the time?
Yes. Brainerd's usually the first fire base that opens because we usually melt off first, when things get dry here first, before the snow will melt up in the northern part of the state. So the two primary tanker bases are at Brainerd and Hibbing, and then there's another alternate tanker base at Ely and another one in Bemidji. And usually Brainerd will open first, and they'll base those aircraft here. And they are really fun. If anybody's ever gotten to see them operate, those are the ones that fly right down. They're the big yellow twin-engine Bombardier aircraft, and they scoop water right out of a lake or a river and then go drop it on a fire.
Those things must be just iron cast, because I don't think I've ever heard of one crashing. And I've seen them many times myself, even when I've been fishing in Canada. The Canadian Coast Guard uses those. Oh, sure. And they're really durable things, aren't they?
I think they're made to take a beating and keep on ticking, absolutely.
Well, you've got a lot of things going on at the regional airport in Brainerd that I think probably a lot of us have never seen before. Maybe you could just talk a little bit about some of the businesses, enterprises that you've got going on at that airport. It's really fascinating.
I think so, definitely. Really, when you first pull onto the airport, the first business that you see when you pull off of Highway 210 is Brainerd Helicopter Service. And that's just a really fascinating business. If people who lived in the Brainerd area a long time probably remember the helicopters that used to fly rides at the Paul Bunyan Center. Mm-hmm. And the last helicopters that they used, they had those Hughes 500Cs that looked just like the helicopter on Magnum PI, had the orange stripes on it. Mm-hmm. And I always loved that show when I was a kid because of that darn helicopter. And they used to fly those, but then they expanded the business quite a bit. And they weren't, when Paul Bunyan moved, they no longer gave the rides from Paul Bunyan. And so they've expanded the business, and they do a lot of air charter work. They do a lot of firefighting for the DNR.
When you say air charter, what do you mean?
It could be just as simply picking somebody up and bringing them from one destination to another. A lot of it, though, is contract work that they might do for the Forest Service, for the DNR, for a pipeline company. It could be, any number of things like that.
You see planes going over the power lines a lot. Is that coming out of there then? Often?
Could be. I know Minnesota Power actually has their own helicopter they use as well, so it could be them as well. And then Brainerd Helicopters actually has a base down at South St. Paul Airport too, and they actually run the helicopter for Channel 5 News, KSTP, out of the Twin Cities. So really fascinating. And the owner out there, Lee Andrew, has flown everywhere in the world. He has just stories that I just love to sit and listen to him.
Hmm. So what else you got going on out there? Obviously a cafe, which I'm sure you get locals that come in. It's a very good cafe, isn't it? I mean, it's done
absolutely.
very well.
Yeah,
what's it called?
Wings Cafe.
Wings Cafe, very appropriately.
Very appropriately, yeah. The new owners have been there for about 15 months. And
is that open? What are the hours that's open? 7
days a week, breakfast and lunch. So,
okay. So it's not open after 2 o'clock in the afternoon?
No, we haven't had dinner yet.
Okay.
And we don't serve beer at our airport, so.
Okay. And then are those airport employees, or is that a private business?
They're a private business as well.
Okay.
Yeah. They lease the facility from us, and they do also some catering for some of the jets that come in and out as well. And but good, really good food, just a nice atmosphere. I go online, you can see posted comments about the airport, and I was just pulling them up the other day on a site that shows those kinds of reviews. And pretty much every comment, the comments about the airport were positive, and every one of them mentioned a cafe. It's actually kind of a rarity to have a cafe at an airport our size. In Minnesota, there really isn't any other.
Wow. So what are some of the other businesses you got out there?
Well, we have North Memorial Air Care, and North Memorial Hospital System out of the Twin Cities operates 2 helicopters in Brainerd. And it's actually their primary maintenance facility for outstate as well. So a lot of the birds that they keep at other airports in the state will come here for maintenance also.
What kind of airspeed do those have, those helicopters, when they're flying patients? They seem like they clip along pretty good.
They go pretty quickly. I'm guessing at this point, but I'd say it's probably somewhere about 140 knots. Maybe a little better than that on a good day.
Okay.
And so they move quite quickly.
And how big of an area do they cover from this Brainerd site?
Oh, they'll go out quite a ways. Particularly, sometimes they'll shift helicopters from one base to another, or if something bad happens in a specific area and they need more helicopters in Bemidji, they'll range up as far as Bemidji, Hibbing, Duluth. And then typically they're flying people either to St. Cloud or down to the Twin Cities.
And what else? I mean, that's about 3 businesses. I think you've got 5 or 6, don't you, that are out there?
We do, yes. In addition to those 2, Brainerd Helicopters, North Memorial Air Care, we also have, of course, a couple of car rental companies out there, Hertz and Enterprise, rather, that operate out of the airport. And then we also, of course, have Delta that operates out of the airport. And then one of the parts of the airport that I think people are often least familiar with is the private aircraft end of the business. And at Brainerd, we average, somewhere in the area of 80 to 100 flight operations per day.
Per day?
Per day. And a flight operation is anybody who shoots an instrument approach, takes off, lands, any one of those things is counted as a flight operation. And only about, 6 of those a day are airline. All the rest are private aircraft or governmental aircraft for DNR or the Highway Patrol or something like that. And all of those airplanes are serviced by the fixed base operator, it's called. That's a term in the business for the company that sells the fuel, provides the maintenance services, maybe rents airplanes, does those types of services. And at Brainerd, that company's Airmotive Enterprises. And it's a business that's been around there since the early 50s. Used to be owned by the Riedel family. And John Riedel Sr. was a big name in aviation.
I remember that name, yep.
Oh, yeah, he was huge. And I worked for John Sr. when I first started working out there, and just a tremendous gentleman. And matter of fact, our airline terminal is named after him. And it was just sold here January of 2013 to DJ Donlinger, who owns Donlinger Motors, Donlinger Chevrolet, he and his dad, and as well as a number of other car dealerships. And then DJ has a partner from Park Rapids who was also in the business.
So when planes that are out there have if they have mechanical issues, they can have that service there? Mm-hmm. Because obviously if your engine's going down, it's not easy to go to another town and have it fixed.
Yeah, so you just don't pull over to the side of the road and get a tow either. It doesn't work.
Right. So do they do props most, or do they service jets too, small jet engines?
They'll service jet prop aircraft typically is more what they'll work on, and they'll do some work on jets as well, straight jets. But up through jet prop aircraft. Matter of fact, Airmotive has just signed on to be a dealer for a particular type of jet prop aircraft, and they've taken delivery on one of them already. It's called a Quest Kodiak. And it's really kind of a neat airplane. It's a high-wing airplane, can seat up to 10 people. But its claim to fame is they actually developed it for the missionary market, for missionaries to fly in and out of remote areas and be able to carry in a lot of supplies and people. So they have really good lift capabilities.
Wow.
And they put them on amphibious floats to fly in and out of flying camps or flying fishing camps in Canada and other places. It's really got a remarkable airplane.
I know one of the things you showed me when we were out there shooting a little of our video was the company that wires planes. Mm-hmm. And boy, I thought wiring was complex in vehicles, but when you see a plane stripped down, that's amazing that they get that back together. That's really amazing. And what do they do there? What kind of, are they doing upgrades, repairs? Are they doing brand new planes, or what do they do? Everything?
Well, it's Avionics of Minnesota is the name of the business, and they've been around for a long time. And what they'll install is the aircraft radios, and then also the aircraft navigation systems. And I learned to fly in the 1980s, and all of the navigation systems were pretty simple. It was all round dials, spread across. They looked about the same as they did in World War II for a lot of years, and the radios didn't look much different either. But now a lot of what they do is they're retrofitting airplanes for what are called glass panels, and it's pretty much what it sounds like. The whole front of the airplane in front of you in the cockpit is glass. It's computer screens, and you can push buttons and call up a number of different images on those screens. So I know one of the airplanes we were looking at when you were there, Ray, was one where they had it all apart and they were retrofitting it for that glass panel. And it's an expensive upgrade. It's not a cheap thing to do, but boy, it just provides an amazing technical upgrade from the old school thing.
And quite a service to have in the area too, I would guess, so people don't have to take their planes off to the metro area or something to do that kind of work on it.
Exactly. Yeah, they developed a specialty. They bring in planes actually from multiple states. They've the Mooney type of aircraft, which is a single-engine aircraft that's kind of a hot rod, I guess, among single-engine planes. They developed a big specialty in those, and you'll see those fly in from multiple states.
Now, is that all of the businesses? Have we missed anybody?
Let's see. Let me think about it. In terms of businesses, that's probably about everybody.
And then you have hangars there, obviously. And how many planes come in and rent your hangar facilities?
We have about 80 planes based on the field.
80?
80. Yeah. And I did think of one more business, by the way.
Okay.
I better mention them before I forget. One that's been there a long time is AW Research Labs.
Oh, sure.
Alan Sibuzar. And the Sibuzar family is an old Brainerd family, been around a long time. I used to buy shoes from Alan's dad when I was a kid.
As did I.
Yeah. Paul Sibuzar, big guy. He was about 6'6", I think, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm. He was.
And Alan's not too much shorter. And it's an remarkable business because he does imaging and analysis of water. So he has a lab that does water analysis on lakes and rivers, etc. But then he also has imaging equipment mounted on his aircraft where he can go and fly over a lake and see if there's an effluent plume that's coming into the lake from a defective septic system or something like that. And he can image that, and he does a lot of analysis for governmental entities and lake associations. So it's actually a very cool business.
And he's been there quite a while too, hasn't he?
He's been there,
in that
yes.
Facility.
Yeah, in a good number of years.
Now, do you have flights coming in at night? 7, 8 o'clock at night, or 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, all kinds of times of the day at night? Mm-hmm. Or you do?
Well, the airport's 24 hours a day, really.
But you don't have employees there 24 hours, do you?
Not typically in the middle of the night.
So if they come in the evenings, they're kind of on their own. They probably have a gate pass or a key or something to get in and out of the facility?
Right. Yep, they can get in and out of part of the building.
So what if an emergency had to happen and a plane had to come in, or in the middle of the night? Mm-hmm. They're kind of on their own?
Well, they would be able to contact the FAA on the ground by radio. And the FAA has my cell phone number and pretty much everybody's cell phone number out there.
So they can get you there if they needed to.
Oh, yeah.
In a hurry.
Yeah.
And is the whole runway area fenced off?
Yes. Yep. We have a perimeter fence that goes around the whole area.
It's kind of interesting. You said that there are occasions when you have deer, and I think you said coyotes.
Yep.
And you said coyotes dig under the fence, and then deer go under that fence area and follow them in? Mm-hmm. That's pretty... I remember when I was growing up, they didn't have that whole area fenced off. And we used to do a lot of skiing out at French Rapids there, and there were a lot of near accidents from deer on the runway. So that's been a solved problem, sounds like.
It was. I remember when I was a kid, we'd have deer out in the runway, and we would have to go scare them away and try and drive them off when I was working out there. And then we had a pack of coyotes move in. And the deer problem went away, but the coyote problem was almost worse because they loved those asphalt surfaces because they were warm in the winter and they'd lay there. Oh. And they wouldn't move if you came up and tried to chase them away. So the game fence all the way around the perimeter was a really good thing.
And I know you said, we were talking about this earlier before we went on air, but there's only been one major accident out there, hasn't there?
Yes.
Over the last, I don't know how many years.
Yeah, that was in 1982. Yeah, a Republic airliner, and it was really an unfortunate accident. The conditions that created it wouldn't happen anymore. There was a snowbank that was packed down hard, and the airplane went into the snowbank, and it sheared off a propeller blade. And we're death on snowbanks out there now. We get rid of them right away.
Now, for security besides the TSA, do you have security that you employ yourself, or do you contract out airport security for the whole perimeter, or maybe you don't even want to talk about that on the air?
Well, all of our maintenance staff I have 4 staff at the airport that are airport rescue firefighter / maintenance staff, and they go out and inspect the airport on a pretty regular basis. They're out there morning, afternoon, and evening driving around, doing an inspection for security, an inspection of the lighting, and just for any other safety concerns, driving up and down the runway looking for foreign object debris, anything that might be a safety concern. So we're out looking quite a bit. And then, of course, the Brainerd Police Department is out there every time an airline flight is boarding. They come out and help monitor security along with TSA.
Now, you're governed by a board, is that correct?
Yes.
Is this an appointed board or elected board, or how does that board get into place?
Sure. Our airport is a joint city-county airport. And
With City of Brainerd?
City of Brainerd and Crow Wing County. And so the board has 6 members, and it's the Airport Commission, it's called. And there is one city council person who's appointed to be a liaison from the city council. And then the city appoints 2 lay people to the board, to the commission as well. And then the county does the same thing. There's one county commissioner who's appointed as the county commission liaison, and then they appoint 2 lay people as well.
So do you report to the board?
I do.
And does the board report then to the city council?
Yeah, typically they do. I mean, what happens more often than not is myself and the chair will go to the city and the county twice a year, and we'll just give a report. And then, of course, our minutes and all the actions that we do are reported as well. We're a public meeting, and we've had Lakeland news at our meetings too.
Great. What do you got in the future? What are some of the plans you're looking at long term here at the airport?
Good question. We just went through a strategic planning process this last spring, and we involved a lot of community stakeholders: the CEO of the chamber, the president of our Economic Development Association, pilots, just a number of people. And in our strategic plan, we really came up with two real big goals for the future. And one is, of course, to increase the number of people who fly out on the airlines. That's a very big goal for us. And right now we're at about 15,000 to 16,000 people per year. We'd like to see that number up more at 20,000 to 22,000 within the next 3 or 4 years. And so we've set a pretty aggressive goal to do that. A second goal is to really, as an airport, we generate a lot of our own revenues, but we're not completely self-sufficient. And so we always want to try and do more commercial and economic development. And so we would encourage businesses to come and locate almost like an industrial park. But our industrial park's different because it's not going to be in competition with anybody else. By law, it has to be an aviation-related business to be located on that airport. So that's the second piece. And then the third thing that we're looking at right now pretty actively is we have that nice brand new airline terminal that was just remodeled and added on to. But our general aviation terminal and cafe buildings getting a little bit older.
So there's some remodeling there.
We're looking at either some remodeling or perhaps even just starting over. And Airmotive Enterprises is looking at actually participating in that.
Cool. Well, we're out of time, but I think we got the major things covered. And as you can see, folks, there's a lot of things happening at the Brainerd Regional Airport. Jeff Wig, thank you very much for being on our show. We appreciate the information, and we'll see you at the airport.
Sounds good, Ray. See you there.
You've been watching Lakeland Currents, where we're talking about what you're talking about. I'm Ray Gildow. So long until next time.